Hello, and a very warm welcome back to Autism Unpacked. I'm your host, Rosie Gilmoss. Throughout this series, I'm going to be exploring the many aspects of autism by chatting with both experts and those with lived experience. So whether you're a parent on this journey with your child, or you're just curious, we're here to have the big conversations and get you the answers that you need. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about sleep. Now, one of the most frequently asked questions I have is about sleep and the fact that often autistic children do struggle. So today I've got Dr. Nikki Greaves with me. Hello, Nikki.
Hello, Rosie. It's really lovely to be here.
Thank you. So Dr. Nikki Greaves is a consultant clinical psychologist who has extensive experience working with neurodivergent people. In fact, she has dedicated her career to improving their lives. So I'm really lucky to have her on today. First off, Nikki, tell me a little bit about your job and what you do and why you are particularly interested in the area of autism.
Yes, of course, yes. So as you said, I'm a consultant clinical psychologist and I first started out in the NHS and getting interested really in autism in the under fives and working in assessment in autism at that time. And at that time, a school opened up called Hillingdon Manor School, and I was hearing these amazing things about it. It was a parent who started the school for her autistic children.
Oh, wow.
And was really wanting to find a setting that could support the start of, that journey, really, I suppose. So I joined the school, and 17 years on,
Still
there.
Why sleep can be an issue for autistic individuals. Sleep deprivation can have a huge impact on us all, and that's particularly true for neurodivergent individuals. Here's why. Now, we are here to talk about sleep,
Yes.
which is a very, very serious issue. It's easy to we moan as parents, we don't get enough sleep. It becomes almost a currency with your partner who's had the most or the least sleep. But when we're talking about autistic people, and we know that sleep affects both autistic adults and children, and in this episode we are talking about autism, we know that there are other conditions that affect sleep. So we know as well that sleep is vital. I mean, you said to me before we came on air, it will kill you if you don't have enough of it, essentially. So
It's such a cool name.
if you have a child or a young person who is really, really struggling to sleep, not only is that going to be having a massive impact on their mental health, their cognitive ability, their ability to learn, it's also going to be impacting further into the family unit.
Absolutely.
So I guess if you don't mind starting off, just talking to me a little bit about why neurodivergent and particularly autistic people might be more susceptible to sleep problems.
Yes. I mean, as you say, it's something that we all struggle with. And I suppose my kind of take on it is that it's just so much more intense, so much bigger, I think, so much harder. If you're autistic, things are more of a challenge, and that then impacts sleep. So I think there's three things about sleep, really. I'm kind of thinking, what are the three factors that we need to think about with sleep? And one of them is the idea to prioritise sleep. As you're saying, if we don't sleep, I mean, it's actually life-threatening. It's such an important thing, and it can be very hard for us to prioritise that. And I think that's one factor that really affects young autistic people, and I can talk a bit more about that. The second one is the settling off to sleep. I used to run a sleep clinic before I came to work in the school, and what I realised was that we actually have to learn how to fall asleep. It's actually a skill that we have to learn when we're babies, really. And that parents are very much part of that process. So that's another thing, is that learning to fall asleep. And then the third part of it is around staying asleep. So staying asleep throughout the night, getting enough sleep, getting enough good quality sleep. So it's the idea of sort of maintaining those sleep cycles. So we're going down into that deep sleep and then up into light sleep, and we're maintaining that throughout the night without that being disrupted. And I think really all three of those areas are impacted for our neurodivergent young people.
And I know from my personal experience in having neurodivergent children that things like rumination, so going over things that might have happened during the day or might have happened even years ago, and that will almost get stuck on a loop. So one of the tactics I use with one of my children is, I call it confession, and he can come and talk to me in the evenings before bed and sort of offload. Brilliant. And it can be anything, but that's something that I've sort of stumbled across as a tool to help. Prioritising sleep. Finding ways of prioritising sleep can be challenging, so let's listen in on some ideas that might help. One of the things I really want to talk to you today is about how parents and carers can help their children get more sleep, because lots of parents really don't want to go down the route of sleeping pills, and obviously that's a controversial issue anyway. So one thing that'd be really great to hear from you about is, particularly with your experience of sleep clinic, some ideas of what helps a child get ready for bed. And that might sound like almost a bit of a patronising question, because we think we all know, the low lighting, maybe a warm bath, that sort of thing. But I didn't know that eating close to bedtime affects your quality of sleep. So it could be even things like, they're having a couple of biscuits before bed and a little, hot chocolate or something, and that sugar could then be affecting their sleep. There's a lot more to it than perhaps we're aware of.
Yes. I think there's lots of different factors within each of those three areas. You're absolutely right. Yeah, I'd agree with you. That sounds lovely, the idea of having that chance to talk through, because one of the big things that is impacting in autism is around emotion regulation, and we know that this is, so that's things like anxiety, it could be around those ruminations, worries around the day. Everyday life is just a greater challenge, sort of navigating those demands and coping with all the those things that everybody would struggle with every day, but if you're autistic, it's even more of a struggle. So that's social understanding, knowing what's expected of you, managing social interactions, managing changes and transitions, and you've got all that during the day, and then you come home and you've then got to, the falling asleep part is all about relaxation. It's all about shutting down, gradually getting your brain ready to sort of move into their falling asleep part. Well, if you've come back from a really tough day, and it's just kind of supersized tough day, often if you're autistic, you come home and then you've got to actually somehow unwind, debrief from all of that stuff from the day, and be feeling relaxed enough to go off to sleep. That's a massive challenge. And in fact, ruminations is one of the things we've noticed that young autistic people can engage in more often as a way to regulate, which isn't such a, it's a difficult one to do, because then you're kind of stuck in the rumination, and that can be really hard. So it's sort of finding other ways to regulate. And I think that idea of offloading is really nice, or writing it down.
Well, I was thinking if you've got a child that likes to write, even texting, because sometimes we know that, particularly for teenagers, they don't necessarily want to talk to you, but they might be able to communicate in another way. I'm now thinking of this autistic child that's come home from school. They've had quite a tough day. They've masked all day. They've had to really, really try hard. Now, most children would gravitate towards a screen, and mine included. So if they are then using a screen to help them regulate, that's going to have a bit of an impact on sleep. So obviously we're not saying your children can't have screens, because that's not the world we live in. But if your child, and we also know there's a correlation between neurodivergent children and screen use, they get very hooked into it. Yeah. So is there a sort of a time span before bed that you would say, right, no screens, or, just some maybe gentle television or something like that?
Yes, definitely. I think online activity, the sort of how popular that is for our neurodivergent young people is it's for many reasons, really. And I think I've worked with young people over the years, and it's often an issue, really, in just the way you're talking about, is that they're not wanting to prioritise sleep. They'd rather actually be online. So we've had some great conversations about this actually at the school over the years. And I think what's a real challenge, so you've had your really tough day at school, potentially, perhaps, I don't know, you've come home and suddenly you're in a world online that actually you're feeling good at, it's your skill, everything is perhaps quite visual and structured, you've got quite a lot of sense of agency about it, you've got your online social community, you can talk to those people in a way that feels really comfortable for you. So there's a lot of well-being, actually, that comes from that online activity. And I think it's a real challenge then, because you've got this well-being, but you've also got this absolute basic need, which is called sleep. And our brains are not very good at anything that diverges from a routine. We kind of know that we feel hungry at sort of the same time. If we don't keep to a routine, I would say 6 out of 7 nights of the week in terms of our sleep, we really struggle to fall asleep. we're sort of lying awake. And that's because our brain is going, well, I don't know when I'm supposed to be falling asleep because you haven't given me a routine.
That's really interesting, because when the children are little, you have quite regimented bedtimes, don't you?
You do,
and I used to love a 7 o'clock bedtime, all that evening to yourself. But as they get older and they tip into preteen and teen, then obviously they're not going to bed at 7 o'clock. They are going to bed a bit later. And I know this. I know that it's important to have a bedtime, but somehow hearing you say it and I didn't realise that if you skip the routine even just one day a week, it can impact your quality of sleep. And that is really interesting, because again, at the weekends we might say to the kids, oh, you can stay up late, it's the weekend.
Yes.
And of course then we're surprised on a Monday morning when they're all groggy-eyed and don't want to get up.
Yes, absolutely. So kind of 2 or 3 nights a week at the weekend completely throws the week, and then they're feeling really, really tired throughout the week, which of course, as you know, it's much harder to, we'll just get up for a start, get to school, engage in activities through the day. It's everything's really heavy going and hard work. And then some young people might we've had some young people who've completely flipped their day around, actually, because they want to prioritise their activities. And they're even doing it when parents are asleep sometimes, so the parents don't know, and this can be a real challenge.
And this is an area, it's probably an area for a whole new podcast on this, accessibility that they have to their special interests. So if your special interest is Minecraft and your parents go to bed and you can get hold of your screen, then the desire, the need to participate in your special interest will override the need for sleep. And then I guess we start to see the consequences. Let's, for argument's sake, let's talk about a 10, 11-year-old that's not sleeping very well and they're autistic. What will be the kind of the implications of this on their mental and physical health?
Yes. So I suppose I was just thinking, going back to what I might suggest as well, really. So we have had conversations with young people where we've sort of said, look, we know this is really important for your well-being. We know following your preferred interest is to the benefit of society as well, perhaps, but we need to make sure, as you say, your well-being is looked after and that you are keeping it to a routine. So it's really thinking about, it can be quite tricky at times, thinking about, well, you need to be, we want you to be accessing learning. We want you to be accessing skills that maybe in terms of your social understanding and the sort of way you're viewing the world, you're not really seeing is important. Perhaps you're not thinking that's important, but we really want to make sure you keep having those opportunities to come into school, that you are able to feel motivated and that you can engage in them and that you have the energy. But also I think if you're then coming to school falling asleep because you've been up all night doing a preferred activity, then your sleep gets more and more disrupted over time. So you're not actually getting out to get fresh
not
air,
getting your green and blue.
Absolutely. You're missing out on so many really important aspects of day-to-day life, growing up around all of those things, being up in the daytime, having a chance to take part in a range of activities, having access to all those activities properly and having the energy to do that. And I think, that can also lead to anxiety as well. So we can see young people feeling much more anxious because things are not really in control anymore, It could well lead to sort of really, sort of feelings of low mood. We might see somebody who's more irritable because they're at school because they just don't really have the energy, as we all might feel. So,
and then if you're snapping at your friends, that could then have an impact on your friendship dynamic, which is going to have an impact on your mental health and your emotional support group. And it just impacts on everything.
Absolutely.
And we know that a lot of people who are autistic also have ADHD, and we know that the ADHD brain really, really needs sleep in order to function. It's getting the message through to the children, I guess, because if they see it as important, they'll be more inclined to do it. If it's not just mum or dad or whoever nagging them. And one of the, not that it always works, but one of the ways I describe it is, like your iPad needs charging, so does your brain. And if you put it into that where they can understand it, and it sort of almost is a tangible thing they can understand, but it does, and it scares me as they get towards teenagers as well. It scares me of how much access they'll have.
And parents are making a lot of effort, honestly, and I think it was amazing that the teenagers I was working with could still somehow switch it on and get on. I was like, how on earth are you doing that? I wish I had those.
I know,
skills.
And this is it. We think we've created a safe place for them, and of course, it not always. And this is probably quite a tricky one to answer because it will depend very much on the child. But would you advise or caution against certainly mobile devices in bedrooms?
Yes, I suppose it is about talking to them about it. I think it is about valuing how important it is to them to have this access. But I think it's also kind of saying, we really do need to talk to you about the importance of all the other things in your life as well. So let's work out how we can make, how can we make this work?
Mm-hmm.
So we had one young person who'd be up most of the night because his community were all in the States.
Yes.
So then we're sort of like, well, how are we going to work this out? Because we also want you to be talking to your friends at school during the day. So look, can we make a plan about this? So it's those sort of dilemmas that we're having. So it's saying, well, okay, you're going to need to stop at, it's usually kind of, I don't know, what I'd say 30 to 60 minutes before you're kind of really wanting to settle off to sleep. To, as you say, switch off all those kind of electricals, because it does then kind of wake up the brain, and then it's very hard to, got this energy in the brain. You're not in that calm, relaxed place that you need to fall asleep. So I'd say, yes, probably 30 to 60 minutes before you're wanting to go to sleep, so that they need to stop, really. And I think we can kind of say, well, look, when it's a teenager, obviously that's kind of age and what's appropriate, but it's about negotiating and saying, well, look, maybe once a week you can be up as late as you like. You can talk to, your community, you can be doing that. The rest of the week, though, we've got to absolutely have an agreement that it stops at, I don't know, 9:30, 10, I don't know.
Depending on the age.
Yes, exactly. For this young person was about 16, I think, 15, 16. So I think, and really it's that real kind of supporting the social understanding, because I think often young autistic people don't really see the point of things that don't meet their preferred interest. And why would you, if it's not the way your brain is you're not the way you're seeing the world.
And if they're in full hyperfocus as well,
yes,
that will be very difficult to break that hyperfocus, and then you might have a cross child that you're trying to get to bed as well.
Absolutely, because for them it doesn't make sense. So I do think it's about lots of conversations. That's my big thing is conversations in various ways, conversations through talking, through visuals, just explaining. We're not telling anybody off. We're literally just saying, do you know what? Be really good. I just need to explain why I'm so worried that you're up. I can really understand why, but we also think it's really helpful for you to be having some of that access, talking to friends at school. We really do want to help you learn to get your get your learning for exams and broaden. You might find you need the thing in that lesson in years to come, but you don't know that you need it now. But school is about providing you lots of stuff you don't know that you might need, but we're giving that all to you, because that's what resilience is about. It's about having lots of options. So,
and I quite like the idea of not the blanket no. It's let's find a way that you can enjoy your activity, but without it impacting on the rest of your life.
Yes, exactly.
Now, we're talking a little bit about the sort of, particularly the mental health implications. So, things like mood, snappiness, being sharp, being grumpy, not being able to engage in class, that sort of thing. One thing that as a parent, I'm curious about, and that's, I'm thinking of these parents who've got a child that perhaps has never slept through the night. And this is a common, it's not rare, is it?
No,
especially in the neurodivergent community. So if you've got, I'm making this up as I go. So we've got a single parent who's got a child, two children, one doesn't sleep at all. And this mother has to get up and go to work. Now, she'll be functioning on, fight or flight anyway, because, caring for children with special needs is tough, but then no sleep. And so that's going to impact on their mental health.
Yes.
So I suppose what we kind of need to think about is this holistic approach. So we're supporting the child that can't sleep, but also the family around them. Because
absolutely.
if they're sharing a room with a sibling, they could be disturbing the sibling. So then they're not getting any sleep.
Setting the scene for sleep. There are a few parameters to consider when setting the scene for a good night's sleep. So now we're going to pick up a few pointers.
Are you able to sort of talk, I know, again, it's a little bit vague, but a kind of best practice for getting, and again, if we stick to the age of sort of 10, 11-ish, just for argument's sake.
Yes. So what you were talking about before, actually, about, is it good to be on electricals in their bedrooms and things like that? What's that about? So I think that's a lovely example, really, of how we're trying to support parents to support children to set the scene for falling asleep, really. And we're also setting the scene for staying asleep as well. So the first thing we talked about is we do need to prioritise sleep. Okay, we know these things are really important in your life too, and we need to prioritise sleep. So that's the first conversation. Second conversation is, as you say, strategies for falling asleep and staying asleep. So but the first thing to say is you want to set this sleep sort of settling routine within the place that they're going to stay all night.
Right.
So I'll probably go to the second bit first before I come back to the falling asleep. The staying asleep is all about sleep cycles. So basically we go through a number of sleep cycles throughout the night. So we're going into deep sleep, sort of getting that really rejuvenating sleep, then back into light stages of sleep, and then deep sleep again and light stages of sleep. And in the light stages of sleep, we might just kind of stir a little bit, and we might even like have a little look around, check we are where we think we are, and then we go back to sleep again. So for children younger than 10, actually often, but it could be sort of anything sort of up to 10 or those sorts of ages. If they're falling asleep in one place, or the parent's helping them fall asleep, and then they're asleep, and then they put them into their bed, what happens is when they get into the light stage of sleep, they wake up, and instead of kind of going, oh no, I'm going to go back to sleep, they go, hang on, where am I?
Yes.
And by then they're wide awake.
I can remember that when they were babies,
Yes.
and you bring them in from the car and hope they'll stay asleep.
Yes. So I mean, it's very typical. I mean, lots of parents do that, but it's understandable as well. Like you say, you just want your child to sleep because you're really exhausted.
I've driven around the block many times with a small baby.
Yes. So, but just in terms of thinking about what helps, I suppose, it would be about encouraging them to fall asleep in the place you want them to stay asleep. That's easier said than done. But I think you can make the room a lovely place to be. You can spend time in there. You could kind of read stories or do things that are very sleepy inducing. They might want to make the room kind of, sort of nice music. Yes, nice soft lighting. So kind of really amplifying that idea about sleep. And parents can stay, it's not about sort of shutting the door, you've got to go to sleep now. You can stay next to your child and then gradually sit next to them. Then be around the room, then be sort of putting things away, so you're sort of there but not there. So it's sort of about separation in a way, really. But
because I'm wondering if this is separation anxiety with these children, that the being away from the primary carer for those 12 hours at night is sometimes too scary for them.
Yes, it could be. Yes, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. So I think it's kind of, knowing what might happen if they wake up. The idea about how to respond when children wake up. Often children will come into parents' beds, and again, I would say that's fine, okay. And when you want to start changing that for them to be back, to be back in their own beds, falling asleep. So what I'd say is invite them if they come into your bed, they can stay for that night, all night. Or if you have the energy to start a sleep program to sort of start supporting them to stay in their own bed, then try to get some sleep. Even if they are in your bed with you, so that then you kind of have a sort of plan that the night that they do come in, you might want to talk to them about it first, actually, and say, we're going to have a sort of reward chart for you staying in your bed or whatever, I don't know, that they are going to go back every time. So not
they will come
going to go back
bed
9 times, and then on the 10th time you go, I'm just too tired.
And you just have to commit to this.
You have to commit to it. So I wouldn't sort of say you must do it. I'd say just do whatever works to get to sleep first. And then have a go at supporting your child to be in their own bed. I think it's just because then they have, like I said before, it's that sort of idea of the sleep cycles, and they're then sort of waking up and a place they know that you've told them is, you've worked on being a safe, good place for sleeping. And it's trying to keep those other things about that happen in the day kind of outside of that room, which I think is kind of, it's sort of it's what we'd encourage, because we're trying to teach the brain that when you lie in your bed, you feel sleepy and fall asleep. And anything that isn't about that is not helping your brain have that message. But I know it's much easier said than done. And a lot of children spend a lot of time in their rooms. But it's kind of giving your brain those messages, really,
that it's
time to...
If you've got the space, sort of zoning a room is quite good, isn't it? So you have where they sleep, where they game.
Yes.
But obviously, it depends on the size of the space.
Yes, that's a really good idea.
Now, as I'm hearing you talk about, putting the child back in each time, and I can remember doing this with my own children when you're trying to get them into their cots and into their own rooms. And it's very, very hard, and it's very upsetting. And if you're tired yourself, it's really tough. And I'm thinking if you've got a child, sort of 8, 9 child, and they might be, they might be quite big and strong, and they might be quite aggressive if they're upset, or they might be just very tearful, very anxious. It takes an enormous amount of willpower to take that child back and put them in bed. Now, have you got any advice or any tips for parents that are thinking, I just haven't got it in me? I know that you can bring in people to support you, but most people don't have access to that sort of resource. And I'm just wondering if you've had any suggestions that might help people.
Yes. I think having a kind of a routine that's really clear, so that the young person's knowing sort of this happens at this time, and then we're coming off electrical devices at this time, whether you want to sort of a bath, that can be quite soothing, quite comforting, maybe some music that the young person likes. It's kind of perhaps using their interest around things that they find calming. It could be that they write down things or have a sort of debrief about the day, but saying we are going to make a plan about bedtime could be helpful to sort of start that. And with the aims are always about the gradual messages of relaxation and sort of lying in bed and being able to fall asleep. So it's usually sort of
quite collaborative as well. That the idea that you sit with them. I
think so. Yes, I think that's the most helpful thing is involving the young person as much as possible.
Because I think as soon as you say this is how we're doing it, you have no say in it. Yes. Automatically, anybody's going to think, well, actually, no, I don't want to do it like that.
No. But, so it could be an explanation about why. Why you're needing. Why are we needing to have to go to sleep at a certain time. And perhaps do it with them as well.
So. We're all guilty, aren't we? I say I'm going to have an early night, and then an hour later I'm looking at houses on Instagram or something. Exactly. So perhaps if we model the behaviour as well, we say, right, I'm going to come off my phone at a certain time, or I'm not going to be on my phone when I put you to bed, then we're showing that we're prepared to make the commitment too.
That's very true. That's a really good point as well. I do think, yes, it's sort of having that whole household. This is the family routine around sleep. I think that's a really
optimistic,
really nice,
but we can try. We can try.
Exactly. Yes, no, definitely. So I think it's, even if you made that visual, if the young person, it's difficult to have a sort of a conversation that you use lots of language. I think you could still make the visual, you could show it to your child. So first we're going to, turn off electricals, then we're going to have a shower or bath, then we're going to clean teeth, then we're going to listen to music or look at some pictures or, lying in bed, and then with soft lights, and then it's bedtime. But you wouldn't have to necessarily start that straight away. You can say we're going to, we look at it for maybe some days, so until the young person's comfortable with it, and then you can have a go at starting it. I think it's nice to have kind of a visual reward for when somebody's done something. So it's sort of the steps before, or even if they're showing an interest in looking at it, even an interest in looking at the plan would be something that would be really nice to think about.
And I'm also thinking about this idea of them sharing a bed with you, because my children, my youngest two, have shared a bed with me for a long time. And with my middle son, when it was time really for him to move, we moved house and we thought, right, this is a really good opportunity. So he stayed in with me first, and then I went and stayed in his room with him. And then gradually I kind of retreated out, and he doesn't come into my bed anymore. And it's almost like when you wait until they're ready as well, rather than trying to push it, it will be easier. With regards food, now I mentioned at the beginning that I'd kind of been unaware that eating late at night affects your sleep. Somebody compared a sugary snack before bed as bad for your sleep as alcohol. So in terms of waking you up, because the sugar kind of leaps into action a few hours later. So of course that's going to also impact a young person. Now, lots of autistic children in particular have very selective diets, and they might only eat things that are very plain. There might be high sugar content. Might not be the ideal diet, but we deal with things as they come. So if your child is then wanting a snack before bed, I suppose I'm asking you a little bit of guidance on, is there a sort of time, should it be an hour before bed that they have their last snack? I know we think a lot about water and
it's a difficult one, isn't it? I suppose, as you say, you're right, because your stomach's digesting and all those things are going to interfere with that feeling kind of sleepy. Your body's kind of busy doing things, whereas you're wanting your body to be kind of calm and relaxed. So I think probably, eating around 7 7 o'clock sort of at the end, or it depends what time the bedtime is, but probably an hour
of
and a half
hour
before, I would say. Yeah,
and staying away from the
stop.
Haribos.
Yes, exactly. I know, yes, and the sugar, caffeine, as we know, really not a good idea. And that can be even to sort of, stopping drinking any caffeine from 2 p.m. in the afternoon onwards.
No coffee after 10 a.m. for me.
Yes. So that can have a really big impact. But I think it's just trying to separate as much as you can the idea that your body's having to do any extra tasks, because you're really just wanting to focus on that relaxation and falling asleep. So, yeah, I think probably an hour and a half, because by then the body, that you would have digested your meal, or something kind of a light snack or something.
That's
like
really
that.
interesting. Thank you.
Going to sleep. Supporting our young people to fall asleep can be achieved in several different ways, says our sleep expert. Here's her thoughts on how it can work.
So, Nikki, when we think about sleep aids and things that might help our young people sleep, people will often kind of recoil from the idea of medication. And when I say medication, I'm meaning more traditional sleeping pills, which there are some concerns about prescribing sleeping pills for anybody, but in particular young people, because of how addictive they can become. Now, my children have melatonin, and melatonin is a hormone, isn't it? It's a natural hormone, sleep hormone. And what I noticed was that it didn't send them to sleep. It didn't have that kind of, knock around the head with a hammer effect. But if taken a sort of half an hour before bed, they would then be ready to sleep. Now, when my son first started taking it, it was like a cloud lifted off my house, because I wasn't so tired. He wasn't so tired. His behaviour improved tenfold. He was able to access the curriculum better. He wasn't argumentative with his siblings. Not all the time, anyway. It just, I can't really put into words the difference it made to my family unit.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about particularly melatonin, but also any other things that you have found through your work that have been useful.
Yes. I mean, melatonin is something that obviously quite a few pupils who are having sleep difficulties are taking at the school where I work, and it is very helpful. And I think what's nice about it, as you said, it's a natural hormone that's being produced by our bodies anyway, and it's sort of an extra dose of that, really. So that would be being produced anyway as part of this sort of calming, falling asleep type process. And it's amplifying that, I suppose, really.
So if a parent would like to perhaps look into melatonin as a solution, how can they access it? Do they have to go to the doctor, or can you buy it yourself?
Yes. I mean, I suppose what we're thinking about is when we tried those kind of natural sort of setting the scene for bed, we've got the consistent routine, you've given that young person's brain all the opportunities we can have to fall asleep naturally, and the young person's still really struggling, and we're kind of thinking, well, what else can we do? And that could be because they've had sort of the brain is still kind of quite active, thinking through, processing what's happened during the day, or that sort of overlap perhaps for our autistic pupils with ADHD, so that kind of feeling sort of the brain is still very kind of lots of things going on, and
then medication may have worn off as
well.
That's
so
true.
You're trying very true, actually. Yes. So then they're just really, they're not in that sleepy place, So it's that kind of that extra dose really of the kind of sleepiness hormone that we're thinking of. They would need to go and see their GP, to prescribe that.
So if you are considering trying melatonin, the best port of call would be to go and see your GP, or if you're under the care of CAMS, go and speak to CAMS and talk to them, because they'll be able to advise on things like dosage and for the weight of the child. Whereas if you're sort of going off into the world and buying it online, you might be giving them the incorrect dose, basically.
Absolutely, yes.
Some children do benefit from things like white noise, and again, my son, he has rain music, which if he is in my room is quite disconcerting, because I wake up thinking that the ceiling's come in and there's water coming through the ceiling. But he now is very anxious about going to sleep without this music. So it's almost it's been a great solution. But he's going on his first ever residential with part of Options Autism. So his concern is how will he sleep. Now, this is something we'll figure out. But I guess, is there a concern that a child might then become overly reliant on a sleep aid?
Well, I mean, I suppose we're trying to support the brain in getting to into those routines, having those experiences really of falling asleep and managing that. And I think it's also that idea that we have to learn to fall asleep for the young person to think, yeah, you know what, I can do this, you know. So I do think those sorts of things like that, and I think that's a good one to pick up on for our autistic young people often have sensory sensitivities, as you're saying. So the tiniest noise could really interrupt that kind of calming, you know, oh, what's that, you know, whereas others, it may not impact other people. For that young person, it's a real challenge. So I think, you know, it might be really important to have those sorts of things. Could be helpful to have a light box to wake up in the morning, or you know, those sorts of ideas.
Where it sort of gradually wakes you up, sort of using light. So in the winter months, particularly, because the sound of an alarm going off in the pitch black on a school morning is very jarring.
Yes, it is. Yes, and that could be really kind of overwhelming, couldn't it? Again, from that sort of sensory sensitivity. So I suppose what I think is, those sorts of things are really, really good idea because they allow that kind of sense of agency, confidence, feeling in control. And I think, again, it's like sort of gradual. You know, you could always turn the noise down. I don't know if you can, but can you turn the noise down or gradually sort of...
Or switch it off sort of once he's asleep.
Bit, yes, or maybe for him to decide, can he just manage it a little bit more quietly tonight and gradually get that noise level down. That could be, so I think it's about doing things gradually. I think that's always helpful.
Staying asleep. Once we've fallen asleep, it's all about staying asleep, which isn't always easy. Here are some techniques to consider if staying asleep is an issue.
So you've managed to get your child or your young person to go to sleep. So, and in my house, that's actually the easier bit. And then if they then are to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, how can you, because I know as adults, the theory is actually you get up, you go and get a glass of water or something, you change your environment for a brief period of time and then you go back into bed.
Yes.
We can't really be sending the kids off walking around the house at 3 in the morning. Are there any techniques or tools that we could give that child that isn't counting sheep? Is there anything that's sort of a little bit more helpful?
Yes, that's a really good point. It's quite a challenge, that one, for all of us, I think, isn't it? It's kind of finding ways to manage that situation. You're kind of wide awake in the middle of the night.
I find reading works for me. So I sometimes say to the kids, you can read. You must not turn the TV on, but you may read.
Yes. Yes. No, that's a good idea. So I think perhaps I was wondering what was happening. So something's happening. So if they are by now used to being in their own bed, they're doing a slight waking up bit, but kind of going, oh, I know where I am, and falling back to sleep again. So that's not the issue. Is it that they're waking up and lots of worries are rushing into their mind? So maybe trying to find out, why are they wide awake? You know, what's going on? Is it that they've woken up and they're going, great, I've got time to work on my special thing that I like doing, or I can contact everybody in the US, you know,
tidy my room.
Yes, exactly, yes. Because, you know, it's my own time. I've had this actually. It's my own time to do what I want because I have to go to school every day. And actually, you know, so that again, it's that sort of social understanding of, well, it isn't really, you know, although you might not see the point so much of the things during the day, it's really important you sleep at these hours. So I think maybe finding out what it's about might help find the solutions.
Yeah.
And I think, so if it's perhaps worries or anxieties, I think your idea like reading a book, something really calming, maybe putting some music on, or something that feels, like you say, but not electrical devices that are going to wake your brain up. So something that's calming and sort of comforting and helpful. So that's really good, I think. If it's ruminations, perhaps they could spend 5 minutes writing them down.
Yeah, I have a notebook by my bed. Again, it comes back to that collaborative approach, you know, working with your child, giving them the reasons behind your requests, and coming to some sort of compromise.
Be kind to yourself. Situations change and sleep loss doesn't last forever. So let's listen to why it's important to be kind to yourself while getting on with the rest of your life.
Nikki, thank you so much for coming on today, because sleep is one of those incredibly contentious issues, and you know, sleep it genuinely is more valuable than gold at certain times in your life, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Have you got any sort of final words of advice to people listening out there?
Yes, I suppose we're just thinking that, well, I think what you were saying about that idea that it's not forever. I think you're in that sleep deprived, you know, maybe for months, maybe for years, you know, and kind of thinking, gosh, is this going to change? But you know, children change, things change, and as you said, you know, you've got your two sleeping brilliantly through the night now.
Let's touch wood quickly.
Yes. So I think it's about sort of keeping those ideas in mind, bringing them in, doing things gradually, having conversations first, then doing things gradually. And I think also that idea that, you know, real life's rolling along, you know, it's all very well me kind of saying, well, there's a sleep routine to do and this and that going on. I think having those ideas are good because we know that they help. But I think it's also recognising that there's, you know, all sorts going on, moving schools, moving house, new jobs, other stresses
Hormones,
going on.
It could be anything.
Yes, all sorts going on for the whole family, really, various aspects going on. So I think it's just about being gentle on yourself and going, this isn't my fault. Even if you're trying these strategies, you know, you're just doing the absolute best that you can, and to kind of give yourself credit for any tiny steps along the way that are working, looking for what's helping really, rather than kind of giving yourself a tough time when things aren't going well, because you really do need to give yourself a big hug if you're having some tough night's sleep. So yeah, I think that would be what I'd want to say.
Thank you. And I think that's what we need as parents of neurodivergent kids. I think sometimes you just need somebody to say, this will pass. There are other people experiencing it too, because it's quite isolating. And just, and that kind of be kind to yourself. And it's easy to say that to parents, you know, take time for yourselves, have a spa day. Sometimes that's not achievable, but a warm bath might be, or a 10-minute lay on the bed where the kids are watching TV might be. So it's trying to make sure that your needs are getting met whilst you're supporting your child.
Yes, absolutely. And those are really nice examples. It's do something that's doable, but really do give yourself permission to do that.
A week in the Caribbean would be nice,
yes,
but a bath might have to suffice. Well, thank you again, Nikki. It's been incredibly informative to talk to you today, and I hope that our listeners have learnt something as well. If you have got any more questions on sleep or any issues around autism, you can email us or you can visit our website or our socials. But for now, it's goodbye from me. I'll see you next time. Take care.